Welcome, everyone, to our 163rd meeting of the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration. We are very pleased to have with us today Minister Ahmed Hussein.
Formalities, I'd like to welcome Mr. Commits to us today and congratulate normal standing member Michelle Rempel on her nuptials to Major Sergeant Jeff Garner, and we wish her all the best and happiness, and that explains her absence with us here today. Although we had originally been scheduled from 3:30 with the possibility of overflow to 6:30, I believe the consent among the members, or the consensus among the members, is to proceed for a full 51-minute round of questions with Mr. Hussein, and then dismiss the remainder of the witnesses after that and go into committee business on the usual motions. And so without further ado, I call upon the Minister to present his opening remarks for 9 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to be here to present my department's main estimates for fiscal year 2019-2020. I'm accompanied today by Acting Deputy Minister and a number of our senior officials. Mr. Chair, for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada's 2019-2020 main estimates, we are seeking a proposed net increase of $832 million over last year, which includes the items announced in Budget 2019. A substantial portion of this increase, $324 million, addresses higher volumes of asylum claimants and the need to provide practical support to provincial and municipal partners, particularly in the area of temporary housing. As this committee knows well, the world is currently experiencing a record number of people fleeing violence and persecution. With unprecedented levels of people on the move around the world, our government has taken concrete steps to ensure that we address the challenges that this poses in a responsible manner, and to provide support to vulnerable refugees while ensuring that the health and safety and security of Canadians is paramount and is protected. Since 2017, our government has been implementing a comprehensive plan to manage irregular migration, while also improving the productivity and the management of the asylum system. As part of this plan, we have worked very closely and effectively with provincial partners, and even directly with municipal partners when provincial authorities have been unwilling to collaborate. The funding in the main estimates builds on the $150 million that has been previously announced. We have committed up to $474 million for sharing interim housing costs incurred by provinces and/or municipalities to respond to the increased need for housing solutions. The main estimates also include separate votes for key initiatives announced in Budget 2019, totaling $339 million for IRCC in 2019-2020. This includes funding to number one, enhance the integrity of Canada's borders and increase the capacity of the asylum system so that decisions on claims can be rendered faster. Second, improve the services we offer to all our clients, including by hiring additional call center agents. Third, improve visa processing to ensure that Canada maximizes the benefits of business and tourist visitors who want to come to Canada, while ensuring strong screening procedures so that the health and safety and security of Canadians is protected. And finally, to overhaul the oversight of immigration consultants, including through more investigations and stiffer penalties, so that more vulnerable clients can be protected. These main estimates, including proposals in Budget 2019, allow us to continue to strengthen our immigration system and improve client service. We've made a lot of progress on our commitments. Our government introduced the most ambitious immigration levels in recent Canadian history. This represents a major investment in Canada's current and future prosperity by growing our immigration through a well-managed multi-year immigrations plan. The plan provides for an increase in the number of immigrants selected on the basis of their skills and education, and this will help our economic growth and address our labor market shortages, as well as bring much needed skills to our country. And to ensure that these benefits are felt right across the country, we have successfully piloted the Atlantic Immigration Program. We've introduced a new rural and northern immigration pilot program, and we've expanded the provincial nominee program numbers to help attract skilled immigrants to smaller communities across our country. We've also seen a commitment to family reunification by expanding admissions through our Parents and Grandparents Program, the Spousal Sponsorship Program, and the Caregiver Program. We have also ensured that we have an innovative approach to further improve our processing capacity. I'm proud of the fact that we've reduced wait times and backlogs across almost every line of business in the immigration system. Legacy spousal sponsorship inventory went down from 75,000 cases to less than 2,000. The caregiver program, the living caregiver program, backlog went down from 62,000 cases to only 1,700 cases. We are processing the federally skilled worker program express entry system applications in about 6 months, processing new spousal sponsorship applications within 12 months, down from 26, and processing new caregiver program applications within 12 months. In addition to this, the Global Skills Strategy is another example of an innovative program that is meeting Canada's economic needs. It helps businesses grow and expand by attracting highly skilled temporary workers into our country and process their work permits and visas in only 2 weeks, down from 7 months. Building on the success of the Global Talent Stream pilot, Budget 2019 commits to making this pilot program a permanent program. We've also seen the success of the Startup Visa pilot project, and we've turned it into a regular program to drive innovation. This program has helped launch nearly 200 startup companies in Canada in a wide range of industries. Settlement services are also, of course, key to newcomer success in Canada. In 2019-2020, IRCC will invest more than ever before, $778 million to deliver the settlement program to newcomers outside of Quebec. IRCC funds over 500 organizations and provides services to over 460,000 clients, including assistance with learning a new language, finding a job, and integrating into Canada. Mr. Chair, immigration strengthens our country. It helps keep Canada globally competitive by promoting innovation and economic growth and by supporting diverse and inclusive communities. The actions I have noted today demonstrate our ongoing commitment as we continue to meet these goals. Les mesures que j'ai présentées aujourd'hui.
The actions that I have talked about today and the measures demonstrate our ongoing commitment as we continue to meet these goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. I just remind everyone that the normal rules of this committee are those of the House. On matters of decorum, we usually allow some flexibility to directly speak with the minister. But if things, as sometimes they do in this committee, get a little bit heated, we'll address the normal points of order and we'll have the questions then directed through the chair. Without further ado, I ask Mr. Tabera to begin a first 7-minute round.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the officials and for the Minister for being here. Minister, thank you once again for coming to the committee and updating the committee on the great work the department's doing and that you're doing. I want to begin with asking you the $24 million for the processing of temporary foreign resident visas is going towards creating positions for application handling, or is it going to targeted for technology improvements such as IT services?
Thank you very much. That's an important question. Global demand to visit Canada, to work in Canada, or to study in Canada is growing exponentially. Each year, we welcome millions of tourists, temporary foreign workers, and international students. These visitors and students inject billions of dollars into our economy. We are proposing to invest under Budget 2019 $79 million to help with with processing to enable us to process applications faster, to process more applications than ever before. 3.9 million applications for temporary resident visas in 2019, 2020 is what we expect. We will also engage in file triaging, in identity validation, eligibility and admissibility assessment, document review, decision-making, post-decision activities. We engage in quality control, quality assurance, risk management. And at the end of the day, it simply comes down to processing applications that have gone from around 1.9 million to 3.9 million temporary resident applications that we expect. So obviously we have to invest in more resources to be able to deal with this, of course, more full-time employees, but also more technology, leveraging more technology solutions to deal with a huge increase in volumes in some of the source countries.
I think that's a good segue. You mentioned technology. I think that's a good segue into my next question. So you mentioned in your testimony that you talked about the Global Skills Program and how important that was. I just want to also mention the Rural Pilot Program, the Atlantic Pilot Program, the expansion of the Provincial Nominee Program, but specifically to Global Skills Strategy. How all of these programs coming in all together, all at once, really benefiting our economy, benefiting Canada, bringing global talent from abroad. And what I want to end off with here is we have a startup company in Kitchener that just published having a newcomer come in. It was a sponsorship group, Talent Beyond Borders, that sponsored this young individual, and he was able to work in the high-tech company. This was not through the Global Skills Program, but it was through a sponsorship program that we quadrupled, I believe, over the years. How has that been a net benefit to Canada and a net benefit to employers here?
The reason why, one of the main reasons for the increase in immigration levels in every year of our government has been to listen to the concerns of business. Businesses have told us, both small, medium and large enterprises across the country, not just in urban areas, but in rural Canada, they've told us very clearly that they are facing a lot of pressure from not having workers to fill unfilled jobs. And this impacts their ability to grow. And in the process of growth, they also are able to create jobs for Canadians, especially when you're talking about skilled workers who are coming to actually address particular skills shortages that, when they're able to come through our immigration system, are able to actually unlock dozens, hundreds, if not thousands of jobs for Canadians. Secondly, the second question is investment follows talent. When particular investments are made in Canada, one of the main reasons and one of the key things that they look at, major investors, is the ability to be able to find the talent in Canada and be able to bring in talent as needed in their growth trajectory. So Global Skills Strategy is certainly helping in that process, bringing down the processing time from 7 months to 2 weeks is really revolutionary when you think about it. And many employers have benefited from it. In addition to that, the express entry system allows Canada to continue to be a global leader in being able to use our immigration system to bring the best and the brightest from around the world. In many industries across Canada, there is tremendous growth, and they're taking up as much as is possible the local talent that's being produced in Canada through our wonderful educational institutions. But it's not enough. So the delta is being filled by foreign workers who are coming in through various immigration streams to continue to power our economy and create jobs in the process. And I've seen this firsthand.
Excuse me, Mr. Minister. We see that the lights are flashing. There's been a notice of motion for the production of papers. The vote will be in about 29 minutes. It's just a couple of floors above us, so I believe that we could probably get to the end of the first round and then resume our meeting after the vote if we have unanimous consent. Wonderful. About a minute and 15 seconds. Minister, you're still answering the question, or have you done?
I was saying that, I've seen, not just on a macro level, but on a micro level, situations in which an employer has brought in a highly skilled worker that they just couldn't find locally because all those skilled people have been employed locally. And through the injection of that highly skilled worker in the company, they were able to unlock 35, 40 jobs for Canadians. I've seen that in Sackville, Nova Scotia. I've seen that in Northern Ontario. I've seen that in British Columbia and many parts of Canada. So this is a way for immigration policy to equip our businesses and our economy to get the talent that they need so that our businesses can grow and be able to fill unfilled jobs.
Just 30 seconds, Mr. Tamara. Wonderful. Mr. Tilson, for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to thank you, Minister, and the department officials for being flexible and meeting with us under the craziness that's going on in the House, and I thank you for that. I have a question, Minister, that involves my riding, and it involves parental sponsorship application that was under the old system. And there's a family living in my riding who've waited 12 years for the processing of a parental sponsorship application, which was initiated in July 2007. And I appreciate you will have no knowledge of this, but we will give you some paper to your officials, and hopefully you could comment generally on this. The department continues to promote family reunification, yet here we have a family in my riding who have continued to languish in the New Delhi visa office since May of 2009. Seemingly, the department cannot figure out how to update the details, all because the file has the misfortune of being initiated under the original system. So I'm not going to reveal the names for privacy reasons, but I'll have my assistant give somebody up there a copy of more details. He's doing that now. So notwithstanding that this is something that you're not aware of, I would, if you could, comment generally on how this is happening, a 12-year wait.
Our priority is family reunification. I am saddened to hear about the length that it is taking for this family to reunite with their loved ones. I'm, of course, not familiar with the particulars of this particular case. I will commit to you that my team will work with your team to see how we can help.
If someone could contact my
constituents.
office at a convenient time, I'd appreciate it. Mr.
That's
Clinch.
not a problem. Thank you.
Welcome, Minister. I'm pressed for time because of the vote. So when will you close the loophole, the Safe Third Country Agreement?
The Safe Third Country Agreement, as you know, is a bilateral agreement, and so it requires both the United States and Canada to agree to any modernization
So when will you close
or
it?
adjustments. Sorry?
So when will you close the loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement?
It's not something we can do unilaterally. I'm saying any changes or any modernization to that agreement has to be done on a bilateral basis.
Right, Minister, but the PBO has found that and written that the illegal border crossings are costing at least $1.1 billion by 2021. They're saying that this is a continuous cost driver for your department. So again, when will you close the loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement? Do you have a timetable?
I'm happy to discuss costs. The Auditor General highlighted the costs of inaction and underfunding of the system,
Minister.
Which is what.
Sorry to interrupt you because I'm pressed for the votes are coming up, and I need to have an answer on this.
Well, I'm trying to answer your question.
I agree with you, though, that there are cost drivers to policy decisions the government has made, and do you have a timetable then on the expectations of when bilateral negotiations will be completed to close the loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement with the United States?
The Safe Third Country Agreement, as you know, is a bilateral agreement between Canada and the United States. So any changes or any modernization of that agreement has to be agreed to by both countries. What the Auditor General pointed out in the report that was issued about the asylum system is the costs of inaction and underfunding that occurred in the past.
Minister,
That's what we're dealing with now.
I'm happy to reference
Let's be
actually
clear about that.
the AG's report, because in that same report, he has shown that if we do nothing right now, there'll be a steady increase where the wait times will be 5 years by 2024. So if you don't address the loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement, everything will get worse. That's what the AG report says. That's what the PBO report says. This morning, there was a National Post article by the chair of the IRB saying that the backlog on asylum claim hearings is going to reach 100,000 by 2021. All of those things are related to the loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement. So again, Minister, do you have an answer, a timetable, a date before the election, after the election? Have the Americans given the government any indication on when negotiations might be completed?
So I'm happy to talk about processing times. I'm happy to talk about funding. There's a lot that goes into wait times when it comes to the Immigration Refugee Board. We are the government that launched an independent review of the whole asylum system. Our investments this year will result in the dropping of the processing times. It'll result for the first time.
Well, that's not what the chair of the IRB said.
This will be the first time that the Immigration Refugee Board will be funded for the volumes that it actually receives.
But the chair of
The
the
previous
IRB
government
said,
did not
Minister,
fund
it's
the
in the
system.
National Post. They're saying the backlog in asylum claim hearings is going to reach 100,000 by 2021. I know you get media clippings on this.
if nothing is done.
Right.
That's the key point.
And despite that, it's going to get worse. according to the
So
AG
I'm trying
report.
to answer your point. If nothing is done, that's what will happen. But the point is, we are doing something. We are cleaning up the mess from the previous government. We are making the investments that are necessary for the system to actually operate as a system. The previous government starved the Immigration Refugee Board of the necessary resources. They were funding
That's not true, Minister.
the Immigration Refugee Board for 10,000 claimants when you were receiving way more than that. And secondly, the
Minister,
changes that were
you have
made in
tens of
December
thousands of
2012.
more applications.
The interpreters require that only one person speak at the same time, and the normal rule in the House is that a question and answer should have about the same duration. I think the minister has provided about the same length of a response as your question, so I turn the floor back over to Mr. Kamitz for the next question.
When will the government close the loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement? You don't have to give me a specific date. You can give me a year, a timeline, or anything that Americans an indication they have given to you.
Our responsibility is to engage in a bilateral process on a bilateral agreement. That's all I can tell you about that.
Thank you very much. Moving now to Ms. Kwan.
Very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister and the officials. I believe this will be the last opportunity for the committee to engage with them in this way before the election. So I have a number of issues that I want to raise. First off, I brought to the Minister's attention personally a number of cases regarding the TFWs and the what I think exploitation and abuse of the situation. These women are desperate to get the open work permit. As the month comes to an end, they have to pay yet another round of rent, to which they have made no money and have actually expended quite a lot of money to get here. I understand that we can get into all the details of it, but I asked if the minister can commit to have his staff to engage with my staff so that we can see, I hope, an open work permit expedited for these workers. I know that the minister has staff teams looking at the files along with CBSA, Public Safety, and his ministry, Mr. Goodell's ministry. I just ask this because the women are just so anxious and desperate. Can I have that commitment, please?
Thank you. You already have raised this case with my team, and I thank you for bringing it forward. It is unacceptable for workers to be exploited or taken advantage of by employers. We have, and I completely sympathize with these individuals. My office is already working with your team on this, and I'm happy to make sure that we help your office and these individuals to make sure that we help them in every way that we can. I will add that we have made sure that there's adequate resources for increased investigations, inspections, and open work permits for folks who are exactly in this position.
That would be fantastic. I won't go into the details of the case, but for these women, but one of the urgent situation that they require is the ability to work. And because when the month ends in May, they will have to pay rent again. And they have not made any money for the entire time that they've been here. They've had to get into debt and paid to get here, to which they shouldn't have, but they had to for all the reasons that have been highlighted for you, Minister, in the letter. So my office is happy to work with you to get this going, but I really hope that before the month ends, that the open work permit question could be answered. Otherwise, these women are just really going to be stuck. So I'll leave that and move on to another area. On the issue around caregivers, the government has announced two new pilot projects. The officials were around this table last time. They weren't able to answer my questions, so I'm going to put the questions to you, Minister. How long will the open work permits for the spouses and dependents of the caregivers be valid for? And with the dependents of the caregiver, children, if you will, who go to post-secondary education or who need an education system, would they have to pay international fees? What is the policy with respect to their access to medical coverage? And then on another issue related to medical exams, would they have to do multiple medical exams, or could they only just do the one when they first either get approved to come to Canada, and that would suffice?
The whole point of the reforms on the caregiver program was to eliminate the possibility of family separation. And that is why we've allowed, under the new program that we will provide all the details in the fall, is to make sure that when these caregivers come to Canada, they can bring along their spouse who will have an open work permit, and the students can their children can go to school. Beyond that, I will urge you to bear with us as we work out some of the additional details. But the point was to signal to the community that the era of family separation is over.
I appreciate that, Minister, but people actually need to know what the program looks like. And you might anticipate,
we will be informing them.
If the minister says, okay, you can bring your families here, but then they're under a condition to which they would actually have to pay international fees for their children to go to school, it creates an affordability issue about whether or not they can actually feasibly do that. I hope that the minister will take all of this into consideration and answer those questions. Those are absolutely pertinent with respect to that. I'd like to ask the minister this other question too, related to caregivers. There's been files that were rejected after the just prior to the new threshold for the medical inadmissible caregivers' families were assessed under. So this would be the medically inadmissible category, right? And I'd like to know if perhaps his officials can provide this information, how many files were rejected within 12 months of the new threshold for the medically inadmissible threshold was brought in? And if the new threshold were to be applied, how many of those cases would qualify? I wonder if I can get that information. You may not have that, but if you can make that commitment to provide that information, I would appreciate it.
Just about a minute for the response, just over a minute.
We actually will look for some data on that and get back and table it to the committee.
Thank you very much. On the Iranians, we've had long delays for the Iranians, and yet we haven't been able to solve this issue. So I wonder if the minister can advise what work is being done on the reduction of the application processing times for Iranian nationals, and more specifically, the application that has actually received their medical, their security, their criminality checks, and have all gone through, but they are still yet stuck in the system. So I wonder if I can also get the minister to commit to providing information to this committee in writing so that we can actually get to the bottom of this. And again, there are many, many Iranian nationals who are just stuck in the system, talent in which we want here in Canada, and they're ready to move forward.
Just 15 seconds.
Yeah, under the Conservatives, the Iranian nationals were waiting twice as long as other
Sorry,
nationalities.
I just need a
processing.
yes or no because I only
And,
have
we've
15
cut that
seconds. So
number
if
by
I can
half.
get a commitment to have that information.
I believe we received the commitment
Okay.
to get
So
an
my
answer,
last
but that's
question.
actually, there's no more time. It's 7:01. And so we go to our last 7-minute round before we head upstairs for votes. I will note that as we finish this round from Mr. Sarai, immediately after the votes will come back here. I believe the minister has agreed to come back and do the final 23 minutes of questioning. So Ms. Kwan, you will get your 3 minutes to follow up on that issue later. Mr. Sarai.
First, I want to thank Minister Hussain and the department for being here with us today, as well as for the commitment to the integrity of our border and asylum system and overall to our immigration system. So thank you once again. As my riding of Surrey Centre has some of the highest levels of casework throughout Canada, we have seen the detrimental impact of unscrupulous immigration consultants can have on people. The main estimates for 2019-2020 would provide IRCC with $11 million and CBSA with 1.5 to protect the public from unscrupulous consultants. Can you, Minister, explain how these funds will mitigate the risks associated with these dangerous consultants?
Yes, for the first time, we are introducing new administrative monetary penalties to go after unauthorized consultants. We are doubling the maximum criminal fines that are available to law enforcement to go after unauthorized consultants. In addition to that, the budget 2019 provides more resources for CBSA to conduct much needed investigations and enforcement against some of the most complex cases that target people. In addition to that, very important steps are being taken to revamp the oversight mechanism. There will be the establishment of the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants. That will result in a much newer landscape that involves public interest board of directors sitting on the board, a majority, a new code of conduct developed by the Minister of Immigration. In addition to that, the new college will have the power to enter into premises of immigration consultants where they suspect wrongdoing is occurring. In addition to that, they can compel members of the college to come and provide testimony to answer on complaints. There will be a compensation fund for those who have been wrongfully taken advantage of by by immigration consultants. There will be a requirement for the new members of the college to have liability insurance and a much more robust training and disciplinary as well as complaints process.
And how will it help immigrants or students or temporary foreign workers who are facing them? How does it protect them when they complain? Will whistleblowers, in this case, be protected and assisted?
It'll help in many ways. I have seen personally in my previous life as an immigration lawyer where people would come at the tail end of after being out of pocket for thousands and thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars. They would come and say, this consultant didn't even file my application. They took money from me and they didn't even do what was supposed to be done. Those days are over. Those folks will have access to a compensation fund. The misinformation will be tackled on head on. Some of the money that is allocated in budget 2019 will go towards more outreach officers in some of our key source countries for both permanent as well as temporary immigration to go proactively inform people about the proper way to apply and also which credible immigration consultants to use. There will be the new college will also have the power to go to court to get injunctions against unauthorized consultants to prevent them from practicing and preying on people. many times we see people who are in violation of the immigration system are themselves victims of these unauthorized immigration consultants. We see international students who are taken advantage of, who are promised things that are simply not true. We see visitors, we see others, and they are not only disadvantaged by losing a lot of money. Sometimes they're disadvantaged because their applications are not even filed. And so these new measures will result in much stronger oversight, but also much stronger enforcement and investigations, and an ability to, when the worst happens, when these people are taken advantage of and lose a lot of money, an ability for them to recoup some, if not all, of that money for the first time by setting up a compensation fund that will help them out.
The main estimates for 2019-2020 would also provide IRCC with $160 million to enhance the integrity of Canada's border and asylum system. How will this funding impact the functionality of IRCC compared to previous governments?
It'll help, first of all, for the Immigration Refugee Board. The new funding will result in the hiring of 700 new staff to be in place by the end of 2020-2021. Already the investments that we made under budget 2018 are having an impact. Average processing time at the Immigration Refugee Board has dropped to 21 months from 24 months. Straightforward cases are being processed in 6 months. And there are a number of efficiency measures that are being put in place. But make no mistake about it, one of the key things that were hampering the Immigration Refugee Board was not filling vacancies. And we've done that as a government, but in addition to that, making sure that the Immigration Refugee Board is funded for the actual volumes of asylum claims that it is receiving. And so, and that is the first time that this is happening. More resources for CBSA, RCMP and IRCC as well, because we want to treat the asylum system as a whole and not just funding one part of the system and ignoring the rest. Security screening is important, and further efficiencies within the IRB beyond money to make sure that we have fast, fair, and final decision making for asylum claimants.
Thank you very much, Minister. And as agreed with unanimous consent, for those who are watching, they will see that the lights are flashing faster and faster, which means we're getting closer and closer to the votes. I believe we should all be able to be back here by 5:30 to commence the meeting promptly and then hopefully complete our work by 6 p.m. Thank you. Suspended for the next 15 or so minutes. I now call the resumption of the meeting. We have a 5-minute round and a 3-minute round remaining. Again, I remind members that the amount of time available for response should be roughly that provided during the question, so we can keep things running smoothly. Short questions mean more questions. Mr. Commits.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome back, Minister, to the rest of this meeting. I hope there won't be any more votes to interrupt us. So I want to ask you again, when will you close the loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement? You had your officials had 15 minutes during the votes. I'm hoping one of them provided you an answer.
I didn't lack an answer last time, and I'm going to tell you the same thing I've told you, which is the Safe Third Country Agreement is a bilateral agreement between Canada and the United States, and as such, any changes or any efforts at modernizing the agreement has to be done in a bilateral fashion, and that engagement is ongoing. Minister Blair can talk a little bit more about that because he's now leading that process. But
I'm glad you mentioned Minister Blair because I wanted to mention some of the work you've done on it. You met with the United States Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security, Christian Nielsen, the former one, January 18, 2017. The National Observer reported on a briefing note that said that the Safe Third Country Agreement, I'm quoting from that briefing note that's reported in this article, is no longer working as intended. Last year, May 31st, 2018, again, in those weeks, you met with the U.S. Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. At any of those meetings or any other meetings that you've had with officials of the American government, have you asked them to close the loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement because it is driving immense costs in your department?
The Safe Third Country Agreement was signed in 2004, so it's always good to look again at an agreement that's that old to see if there's ways to modernize it, and that's a position I've always taken. In addition to that, one of the ways it can be modernized, of course, is to utilize technology to be able to enhance the agreement, and so again, to answer your question. When you have a bilateral agreement, you cannot change it unilaterally. Canada cannot just change that agreement by itself. Neither can the United States. It has to be done together.
Okay, Minister. So I'm going to ask you on in what year would the government of Canada like to have negotiations completed with the American government to close the loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement because of the cost drivers in your department? Just I can quote one number to you so you could have it. In the PBO report, which says costing irregular migration across Canada's southern border, they estimated that the per person cost of these illegal border crossers is $16,666. So that's what I'm asking again. Does the government of Canada have a year, a harvest season, a month, a day by which they would like to have the loophole closed in the Safe Third Country Agreement?
So since you again touched on the issue of costs, what drives up costs is a lengthy process that has people whose lives are in limbo. It costs us more to do that. It also costs the provinces and territories more money to have asylum claimants who waiting years for a hearing. And that's the system that we inherited.
So when will you close the agreement, Minister?
So the fact is, investing in the system to make sure that there is a fast, fair, and final process for asylum claimants dramatically reduces the costs associated with processing asylum claimant cases.
So I'm going to go back again to the same question I've been asking you repeatedly, Minister.
And I'll give you the same answer.
It's pretty simple. You're basically telling me that the government of Canada has no timetable to complete these negotiations.
No,
pardon me, Minister. I'll let you speak uninterrupted after I'm done. You basically tell me there is no timetable for completing negotiations to close the loophole on the Safe Third Country Agreement.
Mr. Tabera?
I think this is very redundant from what the opposite members questioning the minister, and the minister has mentioned that this is part of another ministry as well. And I think Mr. Commish could direct his questions as well to another minister. I think it's out of the scope.
On the point of order.
Oh, sorry, I think I can real quickly, because you did bring the PBO into the question. that it brings it into within scope for discussion on the main estimates. But I do acknowledge that I think we've received the same answer to the same question many times. And I think everyone understands that that is in fact
Mr.
the
Chair,
answer.
on the point of order, sir, it doesn't take away from my time. I'm glad Mr. Taberra was doing the point of order. I haven't received an answer. I've received responses, and responses are not answers. All I'm asking for is a
Mr.
date
Klintz,
or
I've
year.
already ruled that your question is in order, and you're allowed to proceed now with the remainder of your
How much time do I have, Mr. Chair?
You have 2 minutes and 49 seconds. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. There's a 5-minute round. You have about 50 seconds.
50 seconds. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to go back to what I was saying before the interruption, is that you're telling me that the Government of Canada has no timetable to complete these negotiations, but all the numbers that I've mentioned so far, the 1.1 billion and up by 2021 by the PBO, the AG's report with serious concerns, the comments by the chair of the IRB this morning reported in the National Post paints a picture that unless you close this loophole, these costs will continue to go up in your department. Now, I understand you can't give me perhaps a fixed timeline when the Americans would like to have it completed, but I'm just asking you, when would the Government of Canada like to have this loophole closed in a safe third country agreement, if there's a year or if it's after the election, before the election?
Thank you. I think we'll have to wait until the next round of questions to get an answer to that. I move now to Ms. Said.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks a lot, Minister. Thanks to all the officials also for joining in the committee today. Minister, my first question is, among the many mean-spirited cuts in the last Ontario budget by the Doug Ford government was one of them was to eliminate the legal aid funding for refugees and immigration law services. So the Canadian Association of Refugee Lawyers warned these abrupt changes will have dire consequences for many. For many of us, it was reminiscent of the Harper government's decision to slash healthcare coverage for refugee and asylum claimants. So could you please assure us that with the funding provided to the department in the main estimates, will our government continue to protect the rights of vulnerable immigrants and refugees?
The commitment that we have as a government to provide due process to those who are seeking protection is very important. It's a priority that we have. It's very unfortunate to see that the Ontario government has cut legal aid funding for immigrants and refugees. Historically, Ontario's contribution covered approximately 65% of the province's immigration and refugee legal aid expenditures. So these are cuts that will have significant consequences. We are, of course, in Budget 2019, we're investing almost $50 million over 3 years for immigrant refugee legal aid. I am concerned about cuts that target people who are fleeing persecution and who would like to pursue an asylum claim in order to get Canada's protection. We must do what we can to make sure that these individuals have due process, and Ontario's cut to refugee and immigrant legal aid is a step in the wrong direction, and it will hurt the most vulnerable. Of course, I'm disappointed, but I'm not quite surprised. We have seen a track record of Conservatives in all levels of government to really target cuts precisely against community services that serve the most vulnerable in our society, whether it is the previous federal Conservatives when they were in office who cut refugee health care, a practice that was deemed by the courts to be cruel and unusual treatment. And this is in the same line, and it's really unfortunate that it's happening.
Thank you, Minister. My next question, another important service on which many of the new immigrants rely is the settlement services. So I've seen that we have made significant investment in the settlement program this year, in line with the increase in immigration expected in the multi-year levels plan. We recently completed a study where we heard how important settlement services are and how they could be reformed. How are you ensuring settlement services meet the enduring needs of the newcomers to Canada?
Very important question, because we have a duty to each and every newcomer to Canada, not just refugees, but also across all different streams of immigration, that for those who we invite to join our Canadian family, that we have an equal obligation to at least, to the extent that we can, equip them with the tools that they need to succeed in Canada. That is not only the right thing to do and the humane thing to do, but it's also the smart thing to do, because the sooner that they can succeed, the better it is for Canada. So settlement funding, for funding for settlement and integration is key. It is why we're investing $777 million to fund settlement and integration in 2019-2020. That's a 1% increase over last year's numbers. We have funded over 500 organizations across Canada to provide language training, help finding a job, and orientation for newcomers. Preliminary data shows that 485,000 clients received these services and last year, already surpassing the previous year's total. One of the advancements that needs to be made in the settlement sector, which we're pursuing, is to make sure that not every newcomer has the same needs. So tailoring different settlement services for different kinds of immigrants to ensure maximum impact and success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. We now move to Mr. Tilson. And before we start the clock, I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Tilson. I know that you served as chair of this committee in the 40th and 41st Parliaments, and seeing as this is very likely the last televised session of this committee, I'd just like to thank you for that service and for the excellent work you've done in this 42nd Parliament on the committee. For 5 minutes, Mr.
You're
Tilson.
very kind, Mr. Chairman. I guess that means I have to be nice to the minister.
Not at all.
And I'll try to be. It's a question with respect to the visa issue of Mexico, and I realize there's a gray area between the three ministers, but you are in charge of visas. And the media are reporting that there may be hundreds of Mexican nationals in Canada with ties to drug cartels, particularly in Quebec. And I appreciate that the Minister of Public Safety challenged that, but there's no question whether it's that the figure the media has or the figure that Minister Goodall has, they're here. And this is the result of the visa lift, the government's visa lift in 2006, which I believe the minister's own officials recommended against, and that's the result of that. We've been flooded with really thugs and criminals. So my question to you as the Minister of Immigration, what do you intend to do about this alarming situation, other than to pass it on to the Minister of Public Safety?
Thank you for the question. Mr. Chair, I would respond by saying that the security, safety, and health of Canadians is of paramount importance to all the ministers and our government. And to suggest that that is not the case is completely not true. I will submit to you that our security screening, our independent visa officers and others who make these decisions on who enters Canada is based on a first analysis of making sure that the health, safety, and security of Canadians is protected. Having said that, on Mexico, the decision has significantly benefited Canada. We have seen a huge expansion of trade, investment, and tourism, as well as business travelers and students coming to Canada. Since we lifted the visa requirement on Mexico, we have welcomed over 860,000 travelers from Mexico.
I understand that, Minister. The problem is, and good for you, encouraging trade is a good thing. The problem is, unless the media is wrong, and I can't believe you're going to say the media is wrong, there are criminals that have come from Mexico under drug cartels, according to the media, that are here. And the government knows they're here. Minister Goodall didn't deny that. The only thing he denied was the numbers. So I guess the fact that they're here, what steps are you taking to deal with that issue, to give confidence to the public that these types of people, and I'm sure they're not all bad people, but there are some that are bad. How can we create confidence with the public that this is, or the confidence in the government that this issue is going to be resolved?
The issue of inadmissible travelers. First of all, when you refer to the media, my understanding is that what you're really referring to is one report that has unsubstantiated numbers based on an unnamed source. So,
well, I've read 3 newspapers, Mr. Minister, but I don't want to get into that. It's been alleged, and the Minister of Public Safety has not denied it.
Well, no, what the minister has said, and I have been in question period when he has responded to this question, is he has responded effectively to the numbers that we have.
Yes.
Based on the volumes that
Yes.
that our government has dealt with, which is that out of all the Mexican nationals who visited Canada since January 2018, there have been inadmissibility reports prepared for 190 Mexican nationals. This
you're admitting that
if
some
I
of
can
these
just finish
people-
the answer,
I'm
please.
sorry, go ahead.
This represents 0.04% of all Mexican travelers to Canada. So those folks have been dealt with by our security services, and my understanding is that the system is working the way it's supposed to work.
One final brief question.
We're not going to come to the same accord because I think there's generally a problem which the government has to resolve. The Parliamentary Budget Officer predicts that the cost to taxpayers for illegal border crossing by March 2020, which is under a year from now, will be $1.1 billion. My question to you is, do you concur with the Parliamentary Budget Officer with respect to these border crossers? And if you do not concur, what is the estimated amount?
First
Perhaps
of all,
we will get an answer to that question with the next member, or perhaps the member will choose his own questions. Mr. Arsenault.
Très brièvement, Monsieur le Ministre, vous pouvez
Very briefly, Mr. Minister, you can give your answer to the previous question asked by Mr. Tilson.
yes, I would suggest to you that the fact is, based on the volumes that we've seen this year, we've seen from the beginning of this year till now a 48% decrease of the number of folks crossing our borders irregularly and then claiming asylum compared to last year. That's the first point. The second point is both the Parliamentary Budget Officer and the Auditor General have shown the costs of underfunding the system and making sure that the system is starved for the resources that it needs to deal with the volumes that it was receiving over the last number of years. We have taken steps to ensure that that's no longer the case by funding the asylum system for the numbers that it actually receives, and second, by appointing through a merit-based process qualified individuals from diverse backgrounds to fill vacancies in the IRB, and ensuring that with the budget 2019 numbers and 2018 investments, that it'll result in 700 new staff being hired at the IRB. That will ensure that the processing time comes down, that they can deal with the volumes that are coming in, and treating the asylum system as a system as opposed to just focusing on one aspect of the asylum system and forgetting that it's an entire system that needs continuity and line of sight from reception to removal.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. Moi, j'aimerais juste
Thank you, Minister. I have approximately 3 minutes. I'd like to get away from refugees and asylum seekers, and I'd like to talk, because I'm the only one that asks questions from the Atlantic side. And I saw the implementation as an MP of this pilot project on the Atlantic immigration pilot project. It's no longer a pilot project. It's a project that has proven its mettle. 3 years later, are we able to measure the impact on the Atlantic region of this project?
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much for that really important question. The Atlantic Immigration Program pilot project has been so successful that we've extended it by a further 2 years. It's now a 5-year pilot program. And part of the reason for that success has been the great work that we've been able to accomplish with employers and provincial governments in that part of Canada. It's a program that has really set the standard in terms of working towards retention of immigrants, not just their attraction to Atlantic Canada. It's the first employer-driven immigration program in Canadian history, and the lessons we've learned from the Atlantic immigration program have been used to craft the rural and northern immigration pilot program. It has had a huge impact. In my numerous engagements with employers and provincial officials in Atlantic Canada, I have seen how the Atlantic Immigration Pilot Program has done exactly what it was meant to do, which is address the unique demographic and labor market and skills challenges in Atlantic Canada, but also the retention piece, making sure that the employers not just attract the skilled worker, but also their family, and put together a settlement plan to ensure retention. And the retention rates are climbing. The population increases a testament to the fact that the Atlantic Immigration Program has been a very big success. And in fact, as recently as 2 days ago, I met with one of the major employers from Atlantic Canada, and they want us to double down on that program because it's been so good for them in terms of growth and filling unfilled jobs and bringing much needed skills to Atlantic Canada.
Merci. Il me reste du temps?
May I? 1 minute? What is the goal in 5 years? So in 5 years with the 2-year expansion, what is the number of immigrants coming with their families or?
So the allocation for the Atlantic Immigration Pilot Program for the whole region is 3,000 principal applicants plus their families. And that is on top of the provincial nominee program that Atlantic Canada has access to, which we've increased by 33%, and also the federal skilled worker program, and also temporary foreign workers who we have for some of them we have an obligation to provide pathways for permanent residency. One of the great aspects of the immigration pilot program in Atlantic Canada is to offer a pathway for international students studying in Atlantic Canada to have access to permanent residency in Atlantic Canada through a program called Study and Stay.
Thank you very much, Minister. Ms. Kwan, for the final 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to actually ask about the call centers. As you know, the Auditor General came up with a report basically indicating that 1.2 million people, 70% of them were prevented from reaching an agent. The minister, I know, has since responded, so I have some very specific questions, and that is, has there been a service standard established? If so, what is it?
We have seen since 2016 and 2017.
Sorry, I only have 3 minutes, so I just want those questions answered, please.
Yeah, I can respond.
Sorry. So in terms of the service standards, well, we in IRCC have around 78 service which we give, and we have 39 service standards for different. But in the terms of call answer rate and what we need from the call service center, that establishment of the standard has not been done because of the fact that it is in consultation with the clients and based on the Treasury Board policy.
Yeah, of course it hasn't, because I can tell you, just yesterday my staff was on the phone for close to half an hour waiting for someone to actually talk to a real person. And this is on multiple occasions. And this is actually, that was actually even fast. A half an hour turnaround was fast.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to respond to this.
So I just want to be very clear that, you know, as it's been indicated by your official minister, that there's been no service standard, and this is a real problem. I know that from all of the folks around the table, all the MPs, when you phone or your constituency assistants help your constituents in phoning, you often just have to wait and wait and wait. So imagine if our office are enduring that kind of situation, what it is like for the constituent on the ground, to which this information has been verified by the Auditor General's report. So I would urge the minister to actually get on with the service standards for these call centers. It's not acceptable, the situation as it stands right now. I want to ask a question with respect to...
A little less than 50 seconds.
Okay, I'll ask a quick question. The minister actually said, quote, I'm happy to use illegal if to answer your question quickly, I have to use the word illegal and I have used the word irregular, and I think both are accurate. So the minister uses this interchangeably. I've asked the minister to retract that word illegal in describing asylum seekers. Will he do that?
You're referring to one appearance that I had in front of this committee. The fact is, our government has doubled the number of resettled refugees.
Sorry, I'm asking a specific question with respect to your term.
The time to answer the question, the time to give the answer should be about the same.
So hence you allow for this.
We have more than quadrupled the number of privately sponsored refugees. We have had an increase in the number of people who are able to sponsor refugees privately. We're very proud of our refugee program to settle and resettle survivors of Daesh atrocities. I'm very proud of our government's record when it comes to refugees and providing asylum to the most vulnerable.
Thank you very much. That comes to the end of the testimony from the minister. I'd like to thank you and your officials for making yourselves available, especially in light of the very difficult voting and other interruptions. And we will now move to committee business in terms of adopting or not the estimates with some routine motions. So under the main estimates, 2019-2020, we have votes 1, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and 35 under Department of Citizenship, Immigration, and votes 1 and 5 under Immigration and Refugee Board. And so, do I normally do these myself, or should I ask someone else to move them? So I will. I can just read them. Shall vote 1 under Citizenship and Immigration carry?
Agreed on division.
Okay. Shall vote 5 under Citizenship and Immigration carry?
Agreed on division.
Shall vote 10 under Citizenship and Immigration carry?
Agreed on division.
Shall vote 15 under Citizenship and Immigration carry?
Agreed on division.
Shall vote 20 under Citizenship and Immigration carry?
Agreed on division.
Shall vote 25 under Citizenship and Immigration carry?
Agreed on division.
Shall vote 30 under Citizenship and Immigration carry?
Agreed on division.
Shall vote 35 under Citizenship and Immigration carry?
Agreed on division. You could do this
Chorus
too.
here. Shall vote 1 under Immigration and Refugee Board carry?
Agreed on division.
Shall vote 5 under Immigration and Refugee Board carry?
On division.
Shall I report the main estimates 2019-2020 to the House?
On division.
Thank you all for your cooperation today, especially unanimous consent to allow these meetings to proceed and end on time. And I now call the 163rd meeting of the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration adjourned.